Welcome, everyone. This is the online version of the Gaithersburg Book Festival. It would be a very hot day today if we were all meeting in person. I'm really happy you're here. This is a webinar version of Zoom, so I can see attendees, but you can't see each other. But you're all joining on now, so we're going to take just a few minutes while folks join on. I hope everyone is doing well today. I see some names that seem familiar. Welcome to everyone. I'm really happy you're here. This is a persona poem. We're going to have a 1-hour webinar. The webinar is being recorded. I think you all know that. I just want to remind you. No big deal, really. I'm the one that's going to be doing most of the talking. I really encourage folks to have questions. If you have a question at any time, please raise your hand, which is down there at the bottom of the screen, and I'll take questions that way. And just bear with me. I've done a lot of Zoom meetings, but I haven't done a Zoom webinar. So this will be a little bit different, but it's going to be fun. So another thing I want to remind folks about is the webinar is going to be an hour. And you should have gotten a copy of 2 poems that we're going to talk about. If you didn't, don't worry about it. I'm going to share my screen and we're all going to see it at the same time. But if you did have a chance to read them before, that's just more time with some good poets. We're going to read and talk about a couple poems so that you get a sense of what persona poems are, and sort of there's a really wide range of persona poems and what makes a persona poem. And then you've got some ideas for writing. Then we're going to take 15 or 20 minutes and begin to write a persona poem ourselves. And then we'll come back as a group, and people can share what they wrote. They can share one sentence. They can share the whole poem. They can just listen. It's really up to you, but you don't have to share the whole thing. There might be a section that you really like, which is cool. I think anything that you can produce in 15 or 20 minutes that feels like a keeper is a good writing day. So gonna wait just one more minute for folks to show up. What else do I want to say? I've been teaching poetry for a very long time. I really like talking about persona poems. I write persona poems. I find them really fun to read. They're a really accessible way to get into poetry. Most of you know, persona means mask, right? So it's like a different perspective that you take on, which is really interesting way to just get out of your own head and sort of see things from a different perspective. Okay, I have 10:35, so 5 minutes. I'm gonna start, and as folks come in, they can just join us. But I'm gonna start the webinar. So I'm going to we're gonna start first by talking about that poem I sent. Monet Refuses the Operation. So I'm gonna share screen now. Oops. Realize you guys can, I don't know if you guys can see all the junk on back of my screen, but I'm gonna go like this. So how will I know? If anyone can't see this, please let me know. It's a little weird teaching the webinar versus the meeting because I can't get any feedback about how people are doing or whether they are on board with me here, but I'm going to go ahead. Monet Refuses the Operation by Liesl Mueller. So most folks know who Monet is, right? He did all the water lilies, the paintings. And I think while I read this out loud, whether you've read it already, think about all the words that are about light and space and edges, all the seeing and visual information we get here. And of course, this is around the issue of Monet refusing to have an operation on his eyes. and choosing poor vision, basically choosing his art over 20/20 vision. Monet refuses the operation. Doctor, you say there are no halos around the streetlights in Paris, and what I see is an aberration caused by old age, an affliction. I tell you, it has taken me all my life to arrive at the vision of gas lamps as angels, to soften and blur and finally banish the edges you regret I don't see, to learn that the line I called the horizon does not exist, and sky and water, so long apart, are the same state of being. 54 years before I could see, Rouen Cathedral is built of parallel shafts of sun, and now you want to restore my youthful errors. Fixed notions of top and bottom, the illusion of three-dimensional space, wisteria separate from the bridge it covers. What can I say to convince you the Houses of Parliament dissolve night after night to become the fluid dream of the Thames? I will not return to a universe as objects that don't know each other, as if islands were not the lost children of one great continent. The world is flux, and light becomes what it touches, becomes water, lilies on water, above and below water, becomes lilac and mauve and yellow and white and cerulean lamps, small fists passing sunlight so quickly to one another that it would take long streaming hair inside my brush to catch it. To paint the speed of light, our weighted shapes, these verticals, burn to mix with air and change our bones, skin, clothes to gases. Doctor, if only you could see how heaven pulls earth into its arms and how infinitely the heart expands to claim this world, blue vapor without end. If anyone has something they'd like to share or a comment about the poem, we can take a question or a comment right now. I've got someone in the back helping me out with the techie stuff. Can't say anything wrong, just anything you notice. I certainly noticed all the images of light and color, which Monet as a painter is, very well known for. And I heard newly this idea of my youthful errors, right? Fixed notions of top and bottom. These sort of black and white notions of youth that as you get older, you sort of see are blurring. I think one thing about what makes this persona poem especially strong is that it takes a moment in Monet's life that's specific. So you can always write a persona poem in the voice of Monet. There's a lot of rich material there as a painter. And but putting that famous person or historical person or mythical person in a situation in time that's like especially evocative. So Joan of Arc right before the burning, or Leda right before the swan comes, or Leda right after the swan comes, or Mary Magdalene right before or after the crucifixion, so that you have a situation that's rich and you've got a person already in real dramatic situations. So in terms of theater, that person already has a conflict and you already have some stuff to talk about. It also lets that person have a lot more emotional range, right? So we hear the doctor, we hear Monet sort of pleading with the doctor sometimes, arguing with him, telling him he's a little bit nuts to want to take this away from him. And in the end, really pleading with him to see the whole picture, what's really available for us. So I really like how this, and Liesl Mueller is a master poet, but we go through all those ranges in Monet's voice. It feels believable, it feels consistent, and we arrive somewhere pretty surprising. Anyone have anything they want to share? Anything they notice? You guys. I think another thing that was interesting when I read it aloud to you is him talking about the House of Parliament dissolving into the Thames. And maybe some of you know that painting. I feel like that's a famous painting I've seen. I know I've seen the cathedral. But it's also this idea about politics and nature, politics and the world. So there starts to be, he doesn't see any separation between that. I think that's really beautiful. Okay, we can go on to the second poem if no one has anything they want to share about Monet.
Looks like we do have a question.
Oh, great. Yeah. Hi, Ellen. You might need to unmute.
It's not clear how to talk, how to participate. There's no chat button. I'm not quite sure how this is my question.
Oh, I see. Thank you for asking. So there is no chat button. You raise your hand and then you talk.
Okay, because usually at the bottom there's like a microphone. Anyway, so I think maybe people aren't talking because they can't.
Thank you, Ellen.
Just wanted to raise that. I don't know if it's
yeah, I mentioned that in the very early, and maybe only a few people here. So you guys have had a lot of Zoom meetings, right? Probably you're all professionals at them by now.
But this is different.
And this is a webinar, so there's a few different choices and a few different ways to participate. So we've turned the chat option off, and if you want to raise your hand, that's how you ask a question or participate.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ellen. Do you have anything you want to say about Monet?
I've been screwing around with my machine because I thought I'll read it now. Thank you.
I'm sorry about that.
My fault.
No. Anyone else want to raise their hand? You're going to be just put on the speaker and ask your question vocally. Okay, if you end up having a question later about the Monet poem, we'll just come back to it. I'm going to move on to another example, which is quite different. And I wanted to give you guys a couple ranges of ideas about persona poems. So there's obviously the people, Monet. A lot of people write persona poems in the voice of a famous person, or a historical person, or a mythical character. Or an ordinary person, a bus driver, a police officer, a kid walking to school. And then there's a whole range of animals, right? You can always, suddenly become a dog. Louise Gluck wrote a whole book of poems in the voice of flowers called The Wild Iris. This next example from Sylvia Plath is an object. So that's quite a different little bit of gymnastics to get in the voice of an object, but it can be a really rich, fun experience and quite different than putting yourself in the voice of a person. In some ways it's easier, and in some ways it's a little more challenging. What I like about this poem is all the different ways that all the different words she uses that get at a mirror. So, and expands the idea of what a mirror is. So I'm going to go ahead and read this first. Mirror. I am silver and exact. I have no preconceptions. Whatever I see, I swallow immediately, just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike. I am not cruel, only truthful, the eye of a little god, four-cornered. Most of the time I meditate on the opposite wall. It is pink with speckles. I have looked at it so long, I think it is part of my heart. But it flickers. Faces and darkness separate us over and over. Now I am a lake. A woman bends over me, searching my reaches for what she really is. Then she turns to those liars, the candles or the moon. I see her back and reflect it faithfully. She rewards me with tears and an agitation of hands. I am important to her. She comes and goes. Each morning, it is her face that replaces the darkness. In me, she has drowned a young girl, and in me, an old woman rises toward her day after day, like a terrible fish. This is what I love about Plath. She's just so, she'll just sock it to you. I really love her. She's got a lot of terrific images too. She's a little machine that way. I think what's wonderful is that in the first stanza, we get a lot of words that are about seeing or a mirror. We get silver. And we also get a sense that a mirror is just truthful, that it's unobjective, that it's going to just, it doesn't have an opinion, right? It's unmisted by love or dislike. I'm not cruel, only truthful. So we get a very strong voice from this mirror. You can trust me. I'm just going to tell it like it is. I'm going to reflect you back at you. The eye of a little god, four-cornered. So she plays with an eye and then turns it into four corners. I think there's also an interesting place here where the mirror is looking at the opposite wall and it's pink. I've looked at it so long, I think it is part of my heart. So suddenly the mirror has a heart. And then she shifts to a different metaphor that's going to carry her through the rest of the poem. Now I am a lake. And a lake is a pretty common image that we know reflects back. If we look in a lake, we see reflection. So she's picking a lot of different images about things that might reflect. So it's interesting. Both these poems are actually about light. Both Monet's poem and this poem is actually about light. That's interesting. I don't know if I consciously thought of that when I was doing that. A woman bends over me, searching for what she really is. So now we get focused on a woman, a real woman looking at the mirror, right? The sort of the other character in this. And the liars of the candles or the moon, because of those, of course, those don't reflect back at the speaker. And then she comes back at the end and she's able to give this powerful image because she's set you up. We already know that the mirror is a lake. So now we can go with that because now she's going to use words about about a lake. Sorry. So she's going to use the word drown and she's going to use fish. And she gets to use those different vocabularies because she's set up lake. So if she'd say, now I'm a spaceship, then she could have talked about words for a spaceship, even though that doesn't really make sense. It's a bad example. Now I am a lake. In me, she has drowned a young girl. And in me, an old woman rises toward her day after day. A very interesting way to talk about aging. And it's odd because it gives the woman a lot of agency and the mirror is just reflecting it back. So it's a cool way to think about time in a different way. An old woman rises toward her day after day like a terrible fish. I think the word terrible is interesting too. That could be a lot of different words there. So I'd be curious to hear what people think about her word choice because she's so specific and intentional with all her word choices. I'd be curious to hear which words pop out for you guys, which ones struck you as different or powerful or anything that was confusing. Or anything I said you want to disagree with or you want to add to? Okay, I'm going to leave this up, I think.
We have two
Um,
questions.
Okay, great. Let's see. Hi, Louise.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I just want to bring a comment about this poem here, and also I want to remark that English is my second language, so I will try to do my best. While listening to this poem here, I was just thinking about myself. It's kind of, I was reflecting, we're talking about a mirror. I believe that I am the mirror. It's, it's like talking with myself, thinking about me. It's about my personality, but in two ways. My personality in the ways I see it, and my personality in the ways that other people look at me. Here comes the word, like when you were talking about roles, it's the opposite. When we are opposite, it's like the mirror talking to us and vice versa. I think it has to do with our personality, the way I am, what I accept about myself, about the truth, what I'm feeling. Probably other people, sometimes we feel sad, but other people do not get aware about it. They
Yes.
think we're always happy, but it's quite the opposite. So that's what comes to me while listening to it.
I really like that, Louise. I think that's really, really a terrific perspective about it.
Yes, I even remark, to my past. I was thinking, yes, it was like a journey since I was a child up to now. And I'm thinking at the end here comes, it has to do like when we're young, later on older. But I'm not thinking about older physically. It's like getting mature, because we have been through a lot of experiences throughout life. So that's my comment.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Welcome.
It makes me think of this line, Louise. Each morning it is her face that replaces the darkness. That line has a new meaning to me since your comment. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we have a question from Beth, but we're unable to allow her to speak. I think she needs to upgrade to the latest version of Zoom.
Can she do it in the chat?
We don't have the chat enabled right now.
Oh, okay. All right. Any more questions about this? Ellen, I see your name.
Yeah, I thought what Louise said was really helpful because I was going to ask in this is a wonderful poem. I've never read it before. Thank you for presenting it.
Welcome.
Those middle lines where all of a sudden the mirror seems to suddenly not be what's the word, just a reflector. Suddenly it's making I would say making judgments, but the lake, an agitation of hands. I am important to her, which is interesting. I mean that this mirror or lake suddenly feels important, which seems to give the mirror some agency. And the last line is interesting in it. I know we're not supposed to analyze like this, but knowing what happened to Sylvia Plath and the fact that she never really aged in a chronological way, but anyways, yeah, the mirror seems to suddenly be able to make judgments and interpretations.
which is what a mirror does, right? In some ways, right? You mirror back to someone, right? That's a sort of a common phrase, but it's a very interesting kind of twist, like you say.
Yeah.
And even if you don't grow, even if you, die prematurely, you're still aging every day, and that old person, that old version of you is out there,
Right.
right? So there's like that image rises in you, and it's still out there in the future. So I read it that way too. That's interesting, Ellen. Yeah, for an object, it has a lot of activity. There's a lot of action going on. So one thing, if you're going to choose an object to write as a persona poem, you want an object that gets interacted with, right? So a baseball is going to move around between two people and gets to sail around and whack into people, and that might be an interesting object. I can't think, of course, right now, an object that has less interactions. Most objects are interacting with other things, but the trick for choosing an object for a persona poem is that it interacts with somebody or changes on its own somehow. Some people would argue that plants and trees aren't really objects, they're closer to living things, but something that would interact with people. It'll just give you a little bit more material and a little bit more to talk about than an object that doesn't get picked up or interacted with. So that's something to keep in mind if you're going to choose an object to write about. Does anybody else have anything else they want to ask or share?
We have 2 more questions.
Okay, great. Hi, Kayla.
Hi. I know with poems, there's interpreting what the author meant, and then there's also the personal interpretation. So knowing Sylvia Plath was a pretty unhappy person can influence what she means by the last line. At the same time, she's speaking about being truthful and not cruel. And I think about an article I read a while back about women as we age. When we're younger, we're looked at a lot more. They say we become invisible as we get older, and a lot of people mourn that, but there's a strength in that we're not focused as much on how we appear to other people, and we can become much more honest and much more powerful in what we say when we're able to move in a less concerned about kind of looking in the mirror and trying to reflect back how we appear to other people. We speak more truth to power.
Yes.
And I think that's one way to interpret this that I like a lot as someone who is in my 50s now.
Yes, I love that. And there's a lot about, right, the male gaze. Like, men don't tell me to smile anymore the way they did 30 years ago, which I'm happy about, right? But certainly, like, one thing you could do when it's time to free write is like write your own version of the mirror. This is like the mirror has sort of churned up a lot of responses and sort of, I think it's a very accessible poem because everyone has an experience of, it brings up self-image. It brings a lot of stuff up about being a woman. Like you said, Kayla, I love that you brought that piece up. It feels very important to me. Very important. It feels very much like this is about a very much a gendered poem or a way of talking about specific challenges that women have. So thank you for that. I think that's great. Hi, Louise.
Okay, Melanie. Oh, Melanie, you were talking about objects previously, and it just come to my mind that probably there is not like a less or more, how could I say it, or not, or more important objects in order to write about it. But I think that a key word here is meaningful, because probably a pen is meaningful for me and probably is not as meaningful, for other people. So it's not about a specific object. I think it's about the object or objects that are meaningful for the writer in that moment. How we identify with them, what does it represent for us, and also it could be like kind of a symbol.
Yes. Yes, I think that's true. I think certainly for a writer, the more engaged you are with a topic, the easier it is to write about. But I would also counteract that, Louise, with saying that it would be a challenge to come up with an object that you don't have much meaning about. Like for me, a baseball doesn't have much meaning. I don't really care about baseball. My husband's a big baseball geek and I don't care about it. So it would be a challenge for me to write in the voice of a baseball and find that meaning somehow,
Yes.
So just as much as you can use a poem or any kind of writing to explore what's meaningful for you, you can also challenge yourself to find meaning where you didn't maybe. And I think one thing that I work with a lot of my writing clients and students about is people think they have to have all the answers before they can start writing. I have to know all about baseball before I can write a poem about baseball. Instead of, you start writing and you discover what you discover in the process of writing. In the process of writing is the answers. So don't worry if you know nothing about baseballs. You can still write your persona poem about a baseball. You're going to discover something in that process. It's a first draft. It doesn't have to be perfect, but people, I think, get it backwards, and so they get stuck. And that's why the blank page is often really stressful for people, because they're like, well, I don't know everything about this topic yet. And they just have to be a little more easy with yourself. It's okay to not know. It's okay to wander around. Writing is the process of a thinking mind thinking. It's how your mind takes a walk through the woods and discovers something. So it's an interesting thing. I'm really glad you brought it up, Louise, about what's meaning and what's meaningful and what's not meaningful. And I think that it's a curious thing to explore,
Yes.
And I really like that.
Yes. And for your last comment now, it's, I was thinking about, it's quite similar, like to getting to know a new person. When we do not know the object, it's like when we do not know a person, and sometimes we make a first impression. It could be positive or negative, but the truth is, yes, that we have to get to know that person. The same with the object. We have to reflect about it and think about that object, and probably things will change. Thank you.
I love that comment. And given what's going on in the world right now, I think it's so important. One of the most powerful persona poems I've ever read is written by Patricia Smith, who's an African-American woman. She's also been a slam poet champion. So hearing her perform is really terrific. And she wrote a poem in the voice of a skinhead. So as an African-American woman, trying to put herself into the voice of a young white Nazi American was, some people would just find like, are you kidding me? But again, she wanted to figure out how they might tick, And the poem it's not forgiving, but it's compassionate. She finds a place of understanding what makes this guy tick. And it's really powerful. So I think that's wonderful what you said, Louise, about kind of, you want to get in the skin of another person and sort of, or an object, and see what they think. And for anyone out there who is familiar with theater, that's a pretty standard sort of practice in theater, to sort of put yourself in another's perspective. So with that said, I want to set the timer for, I'm going to just do 15 minutes, 14 minutes, and just choose an object or a person or whatever, and write in their voice. So you're going to use the word I. It's going to be first person. You want to make sure it's first person. I am this thing. And in 14 minutes, we'll come back at 11:15 or so, and we'll share a little bit. So I'm going to set my timer. So we'll have 15 minutes, you guys, okay? Have fun. Have fun traveling. Hi, everyone. That's been 15 minutes. So finish up your thought or your sentence. And hopefully we'll hear some new objects and people talking to us. Does anyone want to share either something they wrote, or you could also share just about the process of it, or even just sharing, you know, the object or the person that you were writing a persona poem about. That's helpful just to hear the different varieties. So I'd love to hear just what people chose to, what eyes people chose to look through for the past couple minutes. Does anyone want to share?
Looks like we have a question.
Okay.
We have a question from Kate, but unfortunately, Kate needs to update her version of Zoom in order to speak.
Kate. Is this the Kate who's been on my writing groups? All right. Anyone else? Sherry, you have a question? Hi, Sherry.
Hi, how are you? I'm enjoying the webinar.
Good.
Mine is I actually had thoughts. I didn't actually write anything, but I was coming through the lens of COVID-19, of how it attacks everyone, all ages, all nationalities, and, you know, just to flip it again and to, you know, have all the feelings and emotions that everyone is feeling towards it.
Yeah. I think that's a terrific perspective to take on. You know, it's I've had a number of people in my writing groups writing from that perspective of being the disease itself, and just a pretty interesting way to look at it. So I think that that's a good choice. It's a very interesting choice to sort of see it that way.
Yeah, and I work in the medical profession, so you know I get hands-on with the disease or the virus, and just seeing how it, you know, affecting even each one of my co-workers differently. You know, some are very scared and anxious, and others are laid back and, you know, take it as any other disease or virus.
Yeah, really interesting. I encourage, you know, just thinking about it is helpful, and to sort of see it from that perspective. And one exercise that you might try or other people might try is writing a letter. Sometimes that feels a little bit easier to jump in the voice, or interview it. You know, it'd be interesting, Sherry, if you could ask COVID 3 questions, what would you ask it and what would it say back? That
Yes.
seems interesting, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting.
And that might be a way to start the poem.
Okay.
Right. So a lot of times you kind of have to wade in the water, you know, and that just ask it directly. What do you know, big questions, you know, what do you want from us? Or what do you, you know, what's your goal? What are you worried about? Where did you come from? Something sort of broad, right? Get it talking, and then
Yes,
really
that's
trust
all.
whatever you say.
Right. That's always been my challenge, is to be descriptive.
Mhm.
It's like being in the science profession, we're more brief and to the point.
Yes.
And when you write, it has to be more descriptive, and that's a challenge for me.
Mhm. Well, and I have no doubt you're descriptive. You just have a different language, you know? And hearing you talk about how your colleagues are reacting differently, you're noticing a lot, and noticing is all you need to have descriptive language, you know? So just trust yourself. I trust that you actually are paying quite a bit close attention. And
Thank
don't
you.
worry about what sounds poetic.
Thank you. I never looked at it from that point of view, because that is so, because my coworkers will say I'm very observant, always, you know, taking in everything and seeing things that other people may not see, but didn't think of how I can put that actually in writing.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of poets who are also scientists and doctors. I mean, William Carlos Williams is the most famous poet who was also a doctor, but Rafael Campo was a doctor, is a doctor, and he wrote very powerfully about the AIDS crisis. So those are two poets you could check out. They're both doctors.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Louise? Did you want to share, Louise?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I just wrote my free poem here, and I was thinking about a plate.
Got it.
So I'm going to ask you a question. The word transparent and clear, are they kind of a synonym?
Is that a question?
Yes, before the poem. This is a question. You know, the word transparent.
Mhm.
Like when we buy like those type of transparent shoes, we call it transparent or clear?
Clear or transparent, either way is a good word.
Transparent. Okay, okay. The title is The Clear Plate.
Mhm.
I am round like the world, the sun and my thoughts, and I'm here to feed your hunger. People will say, you are just a plate. And I will reply, I am a plate. I share with you in the morning, afternoon, and evening. But it is sad, I am not always with you. And you cry for hunger. It is saddest, we will never meet. And thine will become the broken bridge, hopeless to be fed. Sometimes this plate will feel proud, satisfying your welcome needs. Because I am round like the world, sunshine will not always rise and challenge me to feed myself.
Mm. I love that, Louise. And if you guys notice, she picks a plate, so she gets to talk about bigger issues she wants to talk about, which is hunger and caring for others. I heard that too in the poem. And I like how you start with the world image, which is round like a plate. And by the time we get to the end of the poem, our idea of the world is bigger. It's bigger than the plate. And we have now thought differently about the issues of hunger.
That's right.
That's wonderful,
Thank you.
Louise. Thank you. Hi, Kayla.
Hi. I wrote about the cat I grew up with, and it sounds stupid, but as I read it again, I think it's kind of about how we made this cat powerless and how those of us with more privilege take away power. So it's called Myopic Tail-Sucking Cat. My tail, it never gets cleaner, just wetter. My mouth is full of hair. I gag and swallow, gag and swallow. This must be a sign of progress, no? These humans, especially this squeaky kid, relentless, arms reaching, pulling me from my comfortable safety, cool, dark, hidden. I scrabble with my claws to dig in. Why not grip? My paws open and release against my bidding. Where are my teeth, my grip? My foot pads open and released as I'm dragged out into the bright unsafety. angry, determined hands and arms. I yowl in fear, frustration, anger. I hear my voice come back at me, ridiculous, exaggerated, from the head of my tormentor. Furious, frantic, I flail my head towards the cold, hairless hands and sink my teeth in wherever I can reach. This lousy human yelps angrily and releases me. I bound away. Meanwhile, my stomach broils, something unearthed. It boils within me. My body convulses from head to tail. I stretch to make room for it, this monstrous birthing. My mouth unbidden, my jaws, they open wide, and hot, foul, burning lava rises up and out of me. I leave it there below me in the deep middle of the underbed. A gift, a manifestation of guilt for that awful human child. I gallop away from the stench, the pain, the unhidden hiding place, seeking safer harbor, ears perked, listening for more trouble. Hearing nothing, I settle down, curl my tail around me, catch it with my paws. I see the dirt, the filth. I can fix this. I clean and lick and clean and gag and swallow. My tail slick with moisture. The kid passes. I swack her with my wet tail, leaving a wet line and a shriek of disgust from this disgusting human. Finding safe harbor again, I recommence my cleaning until my eyes cannot resist the lids that close and force sleep upon me. That's it.
That was great. As a cat owner, I can relate to a lot of that. I really liked that. But again, you know, you're able to talk about other issues like you noticed. It's so surprising. It's like writing about your cat. Suddenly now you're thinking about control and power, you know?
White privilege.
Yes. It's very, you know, the creative writing process is so great, and the arts let us kind of explore different stuff like that in a way that's very different. I mean, coming from a cat's perspective, you're talking about it in a very different way than if you'd written the poem in the voice of a protester.
Right.
And you'd get at the issue from different angles. That's really cool. I think that's what's really fun about persona poems. So we're at 11:30. We're a few minutes past. I'm really happy that you guys joined me. And I'm gonna get gonna send you just all a thank you email, and I hope you'll stay in touch, and I hope you're doing other things with the book festival. It's a great festival. I was really happy they could move it online. I've got a video online. It's 17 minutes of me reading 6 poems that my husband, who's a techie guy, put together. So you get to see pictures. It's really fun. So I hope you'll check that out and check out the other featured authors at the book festival. They have a YouTube channel. So thanks for everyone coming today and talking about persona poems. I hope you all have a good week. Take care.